It's been a fast start to property in 2021. There has been loads happening, some big news stories that you must be aware of. This week we're discussing stamp duty, the impacts of lockdown, and huge reforms around leasehold.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday morning property investors come to be informed and inspired. If you thought you could take January off and not pay too much attention to the news because nothing much really happens, you are sorely mistaken. Loads going on at the moment, and we're going to round it all up for you, give you everything you need to know in this show. But first, there's something else very important that you need to know.
So last week on the Property Podcast, we dropped a bit of a bombshell, a great bombshell, that we are launching a brand new podcast. And last week we promised to reveal all today. So here it is. Drum roll, please. The new podcast is called Any Other Business. And yes, if you are not quite there with what the theme is, it is on business. Now, this is the podcast we've always wanted to create because it's not out there. We want this podcast to exist. I would love it if I could listen to a podcast that talked about what's happening in a business right now. Because you have businesses that talk about how successful they've been, or business owners who talk about how successful they've been, either near an exit or after an exit. You've got loads of podcasts out there that tell you how to start, and that's great. But what about a podcast that tells you about the journey, the middle part, the bit where the most frustrations happen, the tears, the joy? There's so many ups and downs in that part, and I believe the most learning opportunities as well, that we just had to scratch our own itch and create this podcast.
Yeah, and we know that you love this topic because whenever we record an episode about business, it gets better reactions or more reactions than when we talk about property. Clearly, this is something that there is a demand for more about, and we are very happy to fill that demand. So in Any Other Business, we're going to be sharing the journey that we've been on for the last 8 years or so, everything that's happened during that time, all the monumental mistakes that we've made along the way, including some that could very easily have brought the business to a swift and messy end. We're going to continue to share what's happening behind the scenes in our business right now. And as we've hinted before, this year we are embarking on something big, something hugely ambitious, which is going to dwarf everything that we've done in the past. And we are going to take you along that journey so you can follow along in real time and see what starting a fairly sizable business actually looks like while it's happening. There is nothing else like this out there, and we are so excited about bringing this to you. And Rob, it all starts tomorrow.
It does, but today you can access the trailer. So if you want to get a sneak peek to what it's all about, you can go to our feeds. Now you'll find it on iTunes and Spotify, and for the first time, this will be a video podcast as well. So you can also head over to YouTube. Search for Any Other Business. Should be nice and easy to find on your podcast feeds. You might need to put a little bit more effort in on YouTube. So you can watch the trailer and subscribe. Make sure you do that, because tomorrow, the first episodes, yes, we're going to drop 2, the first episodes go live. So today, get yourself subscribed, watch the trailer so you can get a taste of what's to come, and then the first episodes drop tomorrow. I just want to say thank you in advance because I know what type of audience we have, and we're very lucky to have that because you are ridiculously supportive. This is a bit of a risk, this podcast, because there's probably a good reason why nobody else creates this type of content that we've started to create, because you don't look like superheroes. There's a lot of business people out there that portray themselves as superheroes. They're not. They're normal people, and we're normal people, and we do some good things, and we do some things that are really clever. But we make loads and loads of mistakes, and sometimes really stupid mistakes. And we're documenting that. We're going to tell you what we've done, and you're going to follow along as we hopefully make a lot of good decisions, but also we're going to make some mistakes as well. So it's going to be a unique podcast. There's nothing else like this out there. So please get behind it. Get yourself subscribed. And if you enjoy it, please leave a review because that really helps. We, of course, are carrying on with the Property Podcast. That is our baby. We love it to bits. Don't worry about that. We will be here week in, week out with the Property Podcast. But on Fridays now, you've got an extra bonus of being able to access Any Other Business. And remember, property is a business. And our business is a property business. So if you like this show, I'm sure you're going to love Any Other Business as well.
So hopefully you've now paused, you've gone over, you found any other business on your podcast app, you've subscribed, listened to the trailer, got excited, you're eagerly anticipating tomorrow. But now you can come back, unpause, and we're going to get into our main topic this week, which is our January market update. We do one of these every single month, and we thought doing one near the start of January, there might not be a lot going on because Christmas tends not to be a time when many new initiatives and exciting things get announced. However, there's actually loads going on at the moment, including a couple of really significant stories. So we're going to get into all of that right now. To start with, though, I'm sure it won't have escaped your attention that we've been locked down again.
It's starting to feel like a movie, isn't it, Rob? Like Lockdown 3, Revenge of the Boris. Like it's it's a bit crazy.
In a selfish way, I'm almost glad because when we had the tiers system, I could never remember what all the tiers meant or which tier we were in, and so I'd find it very awkward to have conversations with people about it. And now it's very simple. We're all stuck at home doing nothing the entire time.
To be fair, though, it suits me in January because I am incredibly dull in January anyway. So, like, I go in a lockdown every year, so this is just normal for me.
Yeah, well, we're all joining you. The reason for doing it is pretty grim, and the outcome in terms of the economy is pretty grim as well. But the good news is that for all the rhetoric about how this is going to be very serious and more like it was back in March, actually, when it comes to property, you can do all the same things that you could do before. So viewings can still happen, moves can still happen. You can access properties for maintenance if the occupants are happy with that. So really, property-wise, no change to the situation for the majority of 2020. Everything carries on, just with some precautionary measures in place. And hopefully some of the aspects that were quite severely affected last time because of everyone adapting to working from home, like conveyancing and mortgages, won't be badly affected this time around because everyone's in the rhythm of working from home now.
And that takes us into our first news story, which is around the evictions ban. In England, it was due to end this week, but that's now been extended for another 6 weeks. And we wouldn't be surprised to see that extended further. We will see, depending on lockdowns, I'm sure. But for now, it's been extended. And I know this is a bit of a hot topic, and some people are really for it and some people are really against it, but we have another 6 weeks. There's another story, Rob, which is a little bit more niche, but it's also really important around the lockdown conditions. And this time it relates to mortgages.
Yeah, this is an important one. RICS, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, which is the body that regulates people who go out and value properties on behalf of lenders, has ruled out reintroducing something that they call a material uncertainty clause. So when everything kicked off last year, they put in place a material uncertainty clause, which basically every time they go out and do a valuation, they'll do it, but then they'll put in a sort of a shrug at the end and go, well, but everything's a bit weird at the moment, so who actually knows? You can't really rely on this too much. And clearly that's not very helpful for lenders who rely on those valuations. In September 2020, they then removed that uncertainty clause because they thought that the market was stable enough now and that didn't need to be there. The good news is that they've not reintroduced it as a result of this new lockdown. So that should be very helpful in terms of the mortgage market. There's a quote in this story from a member of the panel who decide these things, which said, "There's no reason to put in a material uncertainty clause because there is an observable market and we've had 9 months to get used to it. We know broadly who's paying rent and who's not paying the rent, and there's been some transactions, not as many as usual, but often when you have many transactions, what one really wants is quality rather than quantity." And I think that is eminently sensible. Back in March and April last year, no one really knew what was going to happen. But now, while the world is very much not normal, we know a bit more what abnormal looks like, if you see what I mean, and what it looks like for the property market. So this seems like the right move to me, and good news for anyone who's transacting right now.
That is good news. It's really pleasing to hear. What would probably also please you is if we told you today that the stamp duty holiday has been extended. It hasn't. Not yet, anyway. So there are plenty of people voicing their concerns around it ending and championing that it should be extended. It won't surprise you that all these voices come from the property industry, and you can understand why that's the case. It's really helped the market. Now, at the time of recording, which is a few days before you listen, there have been no announcements around stamp duty. Although some newspapers have started to report that Rishi Sunak will not bring any tax rises in spring, but will keep to his commitment of ending the stamp duty holiday. Now, he's not come out and said this personally yet, so we will wait to see. But the newspapers may have had that leaked, or, being newspapers, they may have made it up. I know, the thought, but they could have. So we will wait and see. It will be a huge boost to the market if it's extended, even by another quarter, just to let the transactions that are lagging get through. There has been an extension to Help to Buy, admittedly a little bit watered down. So there may be some sort of extension to the stamp duty holiday. We haven't got long to wait. And of course, we will discuss it as soon as we have more.
So those are all stories relating to coronavirus, lockdowns, and the economic consequences thereof. There's also a story that's come out recently, which has got nothing to do with any of that, but is extremely significant. And this is around government reforms around leasehold.
Yeah, this is huge news.
It is, because the government had said previously that they were looking at doing something around leasehold and ground rents in particular. And just by saying that they were looking at it, already it had a big effect. It put a lot of pressure on developers to either do away with ground rent or make the terms around it far less onerous. And many developers decided not to bother charging ground rent anyway because they felt like it was going to end up getting abolished soon anyway. Now the government has gone further and say that they have looked at it and they're going to be bringing forward legislation in the next session of Parliament to actually do something around this. Now, because this is basically just a press release and the legislation hasn't been written yet, they haven't said exactly what's going to happen, but the gist is that any leaseholder, whether they own a house or a flat, will be able to extend their lease to a new standard of 990 years with zero ground rent. That is huge. Previously, you could only extend up to 125 years if you had a flat. Now, 990 years with no ground rent. So that's effectively freehold. They also talk about how they're going to change the formula that's used to calculate the cost of a lease extension or buying the freehold. At the moment, it is unbelievably complicated. It involves a negotiation between two different sets of solicitors. And as we've talked about on the podcast before, if the lease drops below 80 years, it gets even more complicated and even more expensive. They're intending to do away with that. And they're also talking about taking some measures to promote a new type of tenure called common hold, which actually isn't new at all. Common hold has been around for a while, but there are almost no buildings in England that actually use common hold. I don't know why it never took off, but it didn't. And they seem to recognise that it is a better tenure than leasehold, and they want to see it get ground and become the norm. So there's loads in there. As always with government announcements, we have to wait for the detail. But Rob, I'm surprised this has happened because there'll be so many interests that don't want this to happen. But this seems like unambiguously good news for property owners.
It's incredible news. And Rob, you said you're surprised, and I am as well. I thought they would do something, but if they deliver on what they're proposing here, this is massive. And the reason the surprise exists is because there are a lot of powerful and wealthy people who own these leaseholds, and the value of them now potentially could be dramatically wiped out. You know, people's net worth is going to collapse. Now, I'm not saying you should cry for those people, but the reason I mention it is because normally those people are quite influential in government policy. Shouldn't be the case, but it is the case. But here, it appears that common sense and public demand has won, which is just absolutely fantastic. And for all those people who are trapped in leases that double every 10 years, well, I know that they were trying to sort that out anyway, but this gives you peace of mind. You may as well wait now to see what happens. I have at least one lease which falls into that category, and I am very happy with this news and will wait to see what is delivered, even though I have an option to sort it out sooner. So for so many people who own apartments, people who have them as part of their buy-to-let portfolio, this is fantastic news. Also, I think it's worth saying that it will probably give people a lot more confidence to invest in apartments as well in the future. So people who have been nervous around investing in apartments because they are leasehold, that really takes this away from them, that fear away. So it could open the market up to other investors who previously might have been scared off by apartments. I personally don't believe they should have been, and now they've got no reason to be. So it's really, really great news all round. This is a massive story that hasn't really got that much attention, but we are bringing it to your attention because for property investors and property owners, this is huge.
So it's a new year, and that normally means a new rash of predictions about what lies ahead for house prices. But a bit boring this year, Rob.
It is a bit boring. Most experts have probably sensibly stayed away from predicting what will happen in 2021 around property prices. Now, as you heard last week on the Property Podcast, we're not so sensible and we made predictions. So if you'd like to listen to our thoughts and you missed last week, then go back and listen. There are a few that have been brave enough to make a prediction. Rightmove has forecasted a 4% rise. But on the other end of the scale, and it really is the other end of the scale, the Centre for Economics and Business Research warns that property prices could slump by 13.8% this year. They've also predicted falls last year, and they didn't get that right, but I think they're going to be wrong. I hope they're wrong. It's a wild prediction. I mean, that is like really putting your neck on the line. But I suppose They don't care, and they can make another prediction next year and still get press. With a fancy name like that, you're going to get people listening to you. So we will see, of course. So I think the biggest news story here is not that there have been some predictions, but it's actually the lack of predictions from most parties that normally participate in this fun each and every year. Maybe they've all learned the lesson. Maybe we'll learn soon, Rob, but for now, we've made some. So if you want to listen, go back to last week's episode. And Rob, it's not just the bacon we want anymore. We'd also like the Danish mortgage products, please.
Yeah, now I know that many listeners will be keen observers of the Danish mortgage market, so this may be something that you've already spotted, but on the off chance that this has passed you by, a story this last week that 3 Danish banks are going to be rolling out 20-year fixed rate mortgages at an interest rate of 0%. So you're going to be able to borrow money to buy your house for free for 20 years. And of course, considering the impact of inflation, it's going to be better than free. Now, this doesn't mean that the same thing is going to happen in the UK. It's highly unlikely it'll happen in the UK. The way that the mortgage market works in Denmark is different, and there'll still be fees to pay. So it's not quite as it first appears. But nevertheless, if you're looking for signs that the world is a little bit topsy-turvy and things never quite got back to normal after the last financial crash, I think being able to borrow money for nothing for 20 years is a pretty good indication of that. If it does come to the UK, I'd absolutely love it.
So, although the year has just begun, there's plenty that's happened. Wow, a lot has happened already. And a lot is happening in our little world too, as you've heard at the beginning of the show. Our hub extra this week has to be, and please forgive us for this one, but it's the website for our brand new podcast. It's aob.show. So, of course, that stands for any other business. aob.show. That's the URL. Nice and easy. And there you can find all the links to your favourite podcast providers and, of course, listen to the podcast directly there as well. I know I said it before, but thank you in advance for supporting the show. And we'd love, really, really would love to hear your feedback. Good, bad or indifferent. Let us know what you think. You can let us know on iTunes and, of course, through the social platforms as well. We do listen. So please do get in touch. So now you've got even more to look forward to. Next week, we'll be back with Ask Rob and Rob and the Property Podcast. But now you've got Any Other Business, Ask Rob and Rob, and the Property Podcast. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.